And today, I'll be going over Erik Erikson and his 8 stages of psychological development. Born in Frankfurt, Germany on June 15th, 1902, Erikson never knew his father and was raised by his mother and stepfather. Erikson struggled with his identity early on because his stepfather never fully accepted him like he did with his daughters. This led to some of the theories on child development later on in Erikson's life. Erikson grew up using his stepfather's surname, Homburger, but changed to Erikson in 1939. Although Erikson had a great interest in psychology, he never formally received a degree in psychology. He went to the Vienna Psychoanalytic Institute and received a diploma, but he never received that formal degree. Growing up, he excelled at history and art. Met While living in Germany, he met his wife, Joanne Saracen, while teaching at the school where they both worked. They married in 1930 and went on to have 3 children. And one of his children, Kai T. Erikson, became a noted sociologist. Erikson started off his career teaching at the Heitzing School before he moved to Boston, where he studied child psychoanalysis, becoming the first male to do so in the Boston area. Erikson was provided this opportunity to work with his good friend Peter Bloss at this school by Dorothy Burlingham and Anna Froude, where they flourished. Bloss and Erikson were able to develop their own curriculum, which was very successful. The results were outstanding and the children had great freedom. With Erikson, the students studied art, music, poetry, German history, ancient history, and geography. Erikson continued to work at the school for several years while he studied child psychoanalysis and developed his theory on psychological development. Once Erikson and his family settled in the United States, he practiced psychoanalysis, served at the Harvard Medical School, Judge Baker Guidance Center, and Harvard's Psychological Clinic. Erikson spent many years studying Native American children, both in Massachusetts and California, where he relocated to in 1939, 6 years after moving to the States. He spent 12 years in California before moving back to Massachusetts after he was required to sign a loyalty oath claiming he was not communist and refused to do so and was forced to resign from his job at the University of California. Towards the end of his career, after he moved back to Massachusetts, he studied children at the Austin Riggs Center for Emotionally Challenged Youth. He ended his career as a professor of human development at Harvard, where he continued his research and published essays. Erikson's 8 stages of psychological development expand upon Sigmund Freud's 5 stages of psychological development, with 3 more stages and a little bit more detail in each stage. Stage 1, infancy, from 0 to 1 years old. The basic conflict is trust versus mistrust, with the virtue of hope. If the child's needs are constantly met at this stage, they develop a sense of trust. If not, it leads to mistrust and anxiety in the child. This leads to our early childhood stage, which is 1 to 3 years old, with a basic conflict of autonomy versus shame and doubt, with a virtue of will. If caregivers encourage toddlers to explore their environment and become more independent, they develop autonomy. If caregivers are critical and controlling during this time, the child will doubt themselves, which leads to shame and doubt, which leads to our next stage, stage 3, the play age of 3 to 6 years old, with a basic conflict of initiative versus guilt, with a virtue of purpose. Encouragement during this time fosters initiative and willingness to try new things in the child. Criticism or discouragement during this time can produce guilt and make the child feel their ideas are not valid. And this leads into our fourth stage, the school age of 7 to 11 years old, with a basic conflict of industry versus inferiority and a virtue of competence. Support during this time helps the child develop confidence and skills in productivity. Without support, the child can feel inferior and unmotivated during this time, which leads us to stage 5, the adolescence years, of 12 to 18 years old, with a basic conflict of identity versus confusion and a virtue of fidelity. When they receive guidance and are free to experiment during this time, the child will develop a sense of identity. If they are restricted, confused, or overwhelmed during this time of their life, they may experience role confusion, which leads us to our early adulthood years of 19 to 29 years old, with a basic conflict of intimacy versus isolation and a virtue of love. Building successful and intimate connections lead to the willingness to be open, vulnerable, and committed during this time in our lives. Struggling to form meaningful relationships during this time can cause isolation and depression for the person, which leads us to our middle years of 30 to 64 years old with a basic conflict of generativity versus stagnation and a virtue of care. During this time, if we are contributing to others' growth, it fosters the sense of productivity and accomplishment during this time. While if we are feeling unproductive or disconnected, it can produce stagnation in the person. And for our final stage, old age, which is 65 and up, the basic conflict is integrity versus despair with a virtue of wisdom. Viewing experiences as meaningful during this time delivers a sense of satisfaction and readiness to face life's end. If they feel they have fallen short during this time in their lives, it can lead to despair, marked by regret, bitterness, and possibly even the fear of death. Time Erikson spent studying children from Native American tribes helped him develop his psychoanalytic theory by using the knowledge he gained about cultural, environmental, and social influences. His theory on psychological development helped contribute to our current understanding of personality as it develops over the course of someone's life. Another contribution that Erikson's work is the emphasis he put on childhood. He advanced the idea that children are not simply biological organisms that endure, but rather they develop in the context of society's expectations, prohibitions, and prejudices. Some pioneers of educational psychology who influenced Erikson during this time were Anna Freud, who Erikson was a patient of, and they also worked together during his time as a psychologist. Sigmund Freud, who he used his theory to develop his own theory and build upon the ideas that Sigmund Freud had in his theory. He also was influenced by Kurt Lewin, who Erikson ran into when he first came to Massachusetts at the Harvard Psychological Clinic. Finally, he also worked with Peter Bloss at the Heitzing School together, where they had great success, as mentioned earlier. Erikson spent some time in California late in his life, up until 1951, where he was forced to resign from his job and relocate to Massachusetts. He spent the rest of his days studying youth and had his final stint as a professor of human development at Harvard, where he continued his research and published his essays. He spent the rest of his days between California and Massachusetts before eventually living his final days in Massachusetts, where he passed away on May 12, 1994. Erikson, Erikson's influence on current education helps teachers understand how children form their identities through life stages. Teachers who use Erikson's theory effectively can help identify goals, challenges, and concerns at each stage, guiding children in the right direction. Erikson's theory remains relevant today by allowing students to choose their activities and make decisions for themselves. This is his legacy has been applied globally, ensuring children have the opportunity to make choices and develop their identities. This has been a presentation of on Erik Erikson's life and the impact he had and still has on educational psychology. Thanks for watching.